What were you doing when the Twin Towers fell? I was a senior in high school in Long Island, about 17 miles east of the towers. There was an announcement asking anyone whose parents work in WTC to come to the main office. I assumed it was a shooting or another bombing like '93. We turned on the TV and watched it all unfold. I knew about 20 people that died that day, and my parents went to a funeral every weekend for a couple months. The dust from the explosion seeped into our town over the next few days. I still remember seeing survivors getting off the train covered in ash. I just got back to my dorm after an 8 a.m. calculus class. At the time, my default web page was Yahoo, and the news list had a huge breaking headline about a plane hitting one of the towers. I turned on my TV, and within 2 minutes, the live broadcast showed the second plane hitting. My roommate and I sat and talked about how this wasn't just a weird accident, it was obviously terrorists, and crap was going to get crazy, and eventually the first tower fell, then the second. Classes were cancelled the rest of the day, and I distinctly remember the screams from a girl named Cassie just down the hall learning from her mom that her dad was on one of the floors above where the first plane hit and didn't make it out. She left for home the next day and never returned. My heart hurts for Cassie. I hope her family has been able to find peace. Man, those screams. I was passing by a house on my way to the bus stop to go to work a few weeks later, when all of a sudden, someone started screaming no, not in a person's name. It was just pure, unadulterated grief. People had signs on their cars saying rescue or ladder company, with the numbers, etc., please come home. Or the names, so and so, please come home. There were fire companies coming in from neighboring states to cover firehouses and provide ceremonial support for the funerals and memorial services. And the crowds outside the local funeral homes were 20-30-something-year-old people. My next-door neighbors lost their son in the first tower. You can never forget the sound of a mother's loss. Truly horrible losses on that day. That was the day everything changed. I worked for a day trading company. We had data feeds from individuals in the towers. One person that did trading news broadcasts pretty much said, "Crap, the other tower is on fire, I'm getting out of here," and left. Saved his life. I worked in Midtown. We had offices in the WTC. I remember women shrieking. It was crazy. I called my family to say I was okay. It was probably really early where they were. It was hard to explain on the phone what was happening. Guess that was shock. Ended up walking to a friend's app so I wouldn't be alone. It was like a weird apocalypse movie with all of the office workers walking through the park in the middle of the day. The weirdest part was how there was a marked change from the morning office workers who were just walking with their jackets off, and then afternoon they starting showing up with more and more amounts of dust on them. I still can see that one woman and her horror, as her entirety is lined with dust and ash. The place where I worked had a third-story terrace that jutted over the sidewalk slightly, and you could look down 7th, from the lower 50s, and see past Times Square. It's the only time sidewalk traffic moved in one-way direction for as far as I could see. It seemed apocalyptical. I worked in a building about 1/8 mile from Grand Central Station. I was in my cubicle when a coworker yelled for us to get to the conference room. We all watched the carnage on an old tube TV that was used to watch work-related videos. This was followed by everybody rushing to phones to contact people who were working in the towers or around the towers. We were then evacuated because we were close to landmarks, the UN, Grand Central Station, and the Chrysler Building. We were all thinking about how close we were to a possible target. Someone was near Con Ed, but would they hit the power station or the building where they run everything? Friend was in the UN, we knew that was bad. My stepdad was delivering mail from the main post office, 34th St, to the World Trade Center, Tower 1. He said he saw both planes hit and heard the debris hitting the top of the post office truck as he was driving towards the towers. He was ordered to return the main branch, and they were, basically, barricaded in the branch for about 6 hours. He retired 1 year later. My mom was coming out of the Wall Street subway station and all she saw was smoke. The police ordered everyone to walk across the Brooklyn Bridge away from the towers. She didn't find out what really happened until she reached the other side of the bridge. She also retired soon after. In social studies class in 7th grade, and someone came in and told us the World Trade Center had been hit by an airplane. I had no clue that was the Twin Towers until they turned the TVs to the news. I was in the same grade and the same class. Same. Wow, same. They told everyone not to turn on the TVs over the intercom shortly after, so I didn't see anything until I got home. I have a friend that lived in Queens at the time and in 6th grade. Before the students knew what was happening, someone came in the room and said that they were having a school trip to the World Trade Center. They asked the class if anyone had parents that worked there so they could maybe have them help with a tour. They lead the kids out and God knows what after that. And same. Same. Crazy. I had a day of study leave and was shopping for clothes at a local market. I got home to find my dad absolutely losing his crap over the news. We're in the UK, and I had next to no idea what the World Trade Center was. I was about 18 and very naive, but realized pretty quickly it was a major deal after that. I was 11. I hadn't heard of the World Trade Center before the attacks. I knew very well what the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty were, but WTC was unknown to me. I live in Northern Europe. Even as an American, the World Trade Center wasn't at the forefront for a lot of people when they thought of New York City. If you're old enough to remember the '93 bombing or work in financial sectors, it's definitely a bit more significant. The bombing was a big deal at the time. I'm Canadian, was in 9th grade when it happened. I mainly knew about the WTC towers from that episode of The Simpsons where they go to New York and Homer needs to take a piss while waiting for the parking officer. I'm also from the UK and I was 14 at the time, got off the bus from a half day at school and came home to find my dad and uncle stood in the middle of the living room silently watching the TV. Given that he never watched TV, and they both are incessant talkers, I knew serious crap had gone down. The first plane had already hit, but the second was yet to, so I saw it live. Even as a non-American, I will always remember the day the towers were hit. Caught the L at the Graham Avenue station maybe a minute after the first plane hit. From that side of the street, all I saw was a large plume of smoke and thought, I bet I'll hear about that fire later. From the other side of the street, I would have seen the towers. Watched the towers fall from Union Square. Holy crow, was USQ your final destination for that commute? Nope. Had to walk out. Across the Williamsburg Bridge. Stopped at a bar after crossing. Forgot a full pack of cigarettes. Many hours later, at a different bar a little further into Williamsburg, I ran into the couple who had been sitting next to me. They had my cigarettes. That's pretty crazy. It's nice to have a cool little memory that's strange in its likelihood on that absolutely horrifying day. Honestly, that cigarette story is a tidbit that truly captures the essence of that day. Completely agree. After the Boston bombing, I swear the usual aggressiveness on the roads in the greater Boston area cooled off for the first time since the invention of the automobile. Times of crisis really do bring people together, though unfortunately it's often against another group of people. Getting ready for school, friend called me saying to look at the news. We ended up watching the news broadcast all day at school because my teacher said it had more historical importance than anything she was going to be teaching that day. Can I ask how the overall tone was in the classroom? Were people talking, crying, or was it dead silent? I'm assuming this is high school. I'm curious because I was 6 years old at the time, not aware of the gravity of the situation. What a crazy thing to watch such a pivotal moment in US history unfold while surrounded by classmates. I was in 4th grade at the time. To be honest, I think most of the class was just happy to not have a lecture. Oh wow. That's pretty heavy to watch all day as a 4th grader. Most 4th graders probably had very little idea of what was happening. Especially if they're just seeing it on a little, crappy, 8-year-old TV screen that was wheeled into the classroom. I was in high school. We were in complete shock. No one said a thing. I was in Brooklyn, New York, in 2nd grade in school. Schools are built vertically up, and my classroom was near the top floors. We had a clear view at Manhattan and the Twin Towers from there. I just remember seeing fire coming out of one, and my teacher running out the room screaming. We were all picked up by our parents ASAP, and by the time they picked me up, 30 to 45 minutes later, there was ash and debris everywhere. For anyone unfamiliar with NYC geography, Brooklyn is just across the river from where the Twin Towers were, so looking out your window to this is like a front seat view. I was in 3rd grade, in a commuter town north of the city. The principal of our school went to every classroom and told us she has to tell you all something I hope to never have to tell you again after the first plane hit. With the second plane they simply whispered it to each teacher. The teachers knew that 90% of the kids in our school had at least one parent working in the city. They knew some kids weren't going to be picked up at the end of the day. I didn't understand the gravity of what had happened for days, but to this day I have a fear of tall buildings falling or loud planes flying overhead. I can't imagine what it would have been like to actually witness it firsthand while on the top floor of a building at such a tender age. I was in 5th grade. My teacher's wife worked in the WTC and took her first sick day off in 17 years. Epping unbelievable, best decision ever. I was in a Queens public school and I lived close by, so all the parents came to pick us up around 10 to 11 a.m. I didn't understand the gravity either. My thoughts didn't even consider going to that my dad was working in the city as an iron worker, local 580. I found out later it took him 9 hours to get home, most of it was walking. He was 3 blocks away, working on a storefront installation for a very high-end clothing store. Cabs were charging like $300 to $500 just to get over the bridge. It took my sister-in-law 3 hours of walking to get to a spot where she could be picked up to get home, barefoot holding her heels. I work in the city now. That Ground Zero area has changed a lot. It's nothing like what it used to be. I also used to live across the water of LaGuardia Airport. The planes looked like they were going to crash into my house, how big they were. I hope you get over your fear of tall buildings falling, friend. I was leaned up against one of those big tree planters outside the Paramount building on Broad, 30 blocks from Ground Zero, smoking a cigarette to try and calm down after the second plane hit. I felt the ground shake through the planter and rushed back in to find the first tower had fallen. It was one hell of a day. How far did you have to walk to get home? My cousin said he found a guy closing down his bike shop and offered him significant sum of cash. Cousin worked in finance Midtown, to buy a bike to get home, as he knew he was going to have to walk home to Jersey otherwise. Yeah. My cousin managed to catch a cab downtown, happened to be at the courthouse that morning. Got to Grand Central Station, then asked how much to drive me to Westchester. Best $250 she ever spent. My mom was coming out of a tunnel when they heard the news over the radio and then turned and saw the smoke. Not original poster, but I worked in Midtown and lived about 2 blocks north of where they shut the city down, about 20 blocks north of the WTC. I remember heading south into the smoke thinking that I may be heading the wrong direction, but my future wife was at our apartment and I wasn't going to leave her there. That was a long walk. Next day, the face masks were all sold out at every pharmacy because the smoke downtown was so bad for days. In retrospect, it would be the first of 2 events where I scrambled to find face mask. My mom was downtown working near Battery Park. She was outside when the first tower fell and then went uptown with everyone after the second tower. She and her co-workers watched from their boss's office since it could see the towers. I took a professional certification exam that morning. When my exam began, there were reports of a light aircraft that had hit the World Trade Center and that fire department units were responding. When I came out like 3 hours later, both towers were down and the whole world had changed. The whole world had changed. It really did. I think future historians will pin that date as the day that a new era started. It was definitely the end of the 90s in my mind. My history teacher turned the TV on as we watched the planes fly into the towers. Little did we know we were watching history live. Had a half day of school because the county fair was that week and it was all you could ride wristband day. Most of us were pissed because none of our parents would take us to the fair, but we were too young to realize the gravity of the situation on that day. I was in 9th grade American history first period as we started hearing about what happened. We lived 20 minutes from our state capital, Eel. A lot of the kids' parents worked in that area and left work to come get their kids and go home, not knowing what was coming next. They didn't know if other cities would be targeted and there was just a lot of fear going around. With some kids going home, our classes weren't cancelled but they gave us filler work to keep us busy. I was in 10th grade, recent American history. There's something about being in that class that always felt Odd. We had a substitute that day and I have always wondered what it would have been like with the beloved teacher there. Then I went to French class and we listened to NPR with the lights off. I still feel bad for some of the teachers who were clearly upset but couldn't go home. Yeah, most of us thought this was the start of a war. It was, but in a different way, or that we were going to be attacked a lot more. Everyone was terrified. I was a senior in high school. Third period computer class. They turned on all the TVs in the school and showed the broadcast. They dismissed school at noon. I drove to grandparents and sat at the table with my grandpa watching the news. Me and him drove down about 40 minutes away to look at a car. He bought it for me, we stopped for dinner, and we drove home. That was the last time I seen him alive. He passed away that night. I never remember 9/11 as the attack but as the last day with my grandpa. He was a great man. Miss him every day even though it's been 20 years. I say this without a hint of sarcasm or trying to be funny. This was one of the most unpredictable comments I've ever read on Reddit. At no point did I know where this was going to go. It's a weird roller coaster of a day. One I'll never forget for my own reasons. My wife lost a cousin in the attack. She doesn't really remember much as she was 12. Very tragic day and I don't want anyone to think I'm taking away from the actual event. Just sharing where I was on 9/11. I know what you mean about weird, roller coaster days. The summer between my junior and senior years, I had a swim meet that I did uncharacteristically well in, but despite blazing sunshine, I started to get uncontrollable chills. My mom and coach decided I was too sick to keep competing and sent me home before my last event, but I did hear the announcement that I'd placed in the top 3 in my favorite event, which I'd never done before. When I got home, before collapsing into bed, I discovered that my SAT scores had arrived. I had done well, and tried to show my mom, but she got an important phone call and shooed me away. When she hung up the phone, she told me that my grandmother had passed away. I went to bed, cried myself to sleep, and slept till the following morning. I swear our bodies know when something awful has happened before we are even told. The day my grandfather died, I felt sick and decided to stay in bed the whole day, until my mom came in my room and told me he passed. Sorry about your loss, man. I wonder how the car went. After all, it was his last present to you. It was a 1984 Camaro Z28 hardtop. It was a very nice car for what it was. 305 auto, it was a dog, but it was fun to drive. I was actually buying my first house when I was 23 and the bank wanted 10%, money down. House was $50,000. I sold it for $5,000. I figured my grandpa would rather I get a home rather than a car. Last time I seen the car, a guy had it at a car show 5 years ago. Same guy I sold it to. He is in his late 60s, early 70s by now. We shook hands and talked a bit. He knew the story and he has my contact information and said his wife has instructions on how to get a hold of me if something happens to him. He loves the car. Hey, great story for a car. Really. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Reader's new videos. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube and share them with your friends. We welcome your comments below. Press to start another of our videos.